Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us today. As you know, we're EdgeTech, we're the leaders in the RPA, intelligent automation space within recruitment. And our webinar today is on navigating change management, especially within the RPA setting. What are the struggles that people are finding? How are they able to fix it, and what are the best practices, I guess, if you're looking to embark on your journey? What things should you know before? What things do people maybe wish they knew before they started? So we've got three lovely guests with us today. We've got Cassidy, who's head of advisory at Tquila Automation, also founder of Women in Automation. So looking forward to finding out a bit more about both of those. Gregor, who's co-founder of PugliAI, and also you may know him from YouTube as the RPA champion. And Laura, who's the transformation director at Zukunft Consulting. I mean, I've probably said that wrong, but we're here.
Yeah.
But yeah, quickly, just a couple of minutes on each of you. Laura, if you want to go first and correct me on my pronunciation, and then talk a bit about your background, what you've been up to, and your experience within change.
Yes, of course. Yes, the naming does cause hilarity. So Zukunft, it's German, stands for future. So it's future consulting. Is what I've been doing. I've been in the I started off my career in investment banking in the operations space, but I've been in technology programs now since 2008. I was thinking about this earlier where I was prepping some of my answers and some of the learnings. But I've been in the RPA world really since I joined Deloitte's Swiss practice, because I'm a fluent French and German speaker, and got my first exposure to putting together automation business cases back in 2015. Got the bug. It was new technology, but could do so. I got exposure to things like algorithmic trading from my past, but this was technology that could do so much more than it was just about revenue generation. And I've implemented in industry, in consultancies, for my own consultancy, and also in the public sector for some quite substantial return on investments. So been there, got the war wounds, and excited to learn from others as well.
Perfect, brilliant. No, really excited to learn your insights of all that career. Gregor, talk to me.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody, to all the guests, and for the time. I got into RPA also around 2015. I was working in EY in risk and compliance, something that I thought was going to be the end of my career in EY. Actually, thank God I discovered, at the time I discovered UiPath with our free certifications, and I thought it could really change processes. In Italy, there was nobody that was doing robotic process automation. There was no fuss about it. It was really an underground topic. So I had to identify a couple of processes within EY and get certifications, really without nobody pushing and nobody really wanting to do this. And that's how I actually started. After that, I moved to KPMG as senior manager in AI and robotic process automation. I went to Canada. Worked more in the consultant life, and then I started a SaaS company called Process Lens, which is a tool to identify processes for automation. I sold that business to a Brazilian consulting company focused on RPA, and now I am into AI and RPA. So I think right now we are in a phase where we can do end-to-end automation. So basically all of the complicated stuff that before we couldn't do with RPA, right now with generative AI, it's very easy to get understanding of it and just do more with very little resources. So I'm really excited about RPA right now. I think it's a great time for RPA.
No, I definitely agree. And Cassidy, thanks for joining us all the way from Texas. So tell us a bit about your background and what you're doing at the moment.
Yes, of course. Hey there, everyone. My name is Cassidy Reid. I'm head of advisory at Tquila Automation and also the founder of Women in Automation. I have about a decade of experience in the intelligent automation space. It's been a wild ride. As Gregor was saying, there's not many people, even a decade ago, who were in this space, and now it's just booming, which is amazing. But I started off my journey in digital marketing and then quickly moved over to Genpact, where I was one of their first hires in the intelligent automation consulting firm. Spent a few years there and worked my way up, then moved over to EPAM Systems and their intelligent automation consulting. And finally, I'm at Tquila Automation now, where I'm focused on automation strategy and how to best implement automation for our clients and their organizations. But about a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, I founded Women in Automation. I was noticing I'm frequently the only woman in the room for these automation programs, and that really frustrated me. I feel like there should be more representation, and I love working with other women. And I truly believe that diversity and inclusivity can only enhance innovation, and that's exactly what this automation space needs. So that's why I founded Women in Automation, to bring more women into the space, network, and bring a solid community together.
No, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Laura can attest to the same thing from her side, especially working in banking as well. That's double the trouble, isn't it? So I'm sure you can understand that.
Yeah, very much so.
And we see in the recruitment side of things. I mean, it's you want to try as hard as you can to make sure you provide as diverse a shortlist and all of this sort of stuff, and make sure that you can get as many different backgrounds, because automation shouldn't be something that's just one person or anything like that. As much as anything, and I'm sure you'll all go into it, the diversity side of things just really does help when you're trying to work out how best to change, how it's going to impact, and what impact it's going to have. If you've only got one narrow view of it, then how are you going to work out the change for a whole organization? But yeah, we'll get into it now. So I quite like the fact that we've got people working from vendors to consultancies with end user experience to really get that whole view of the marketplace and the landscape for change. And Laura, with some of the projects that you've done, what would you say have been some of the most impactful changes that you've driven through RPA, and how did change management play a role in those?
Right, yes. So I mean, you can't realistically do anything without an element of change management. It's absolutely crucial to build the awareness, build the desire, and also keep sustaining the change, keep reinforcing the change. So it's very, very sad whenever you see scenarios that an organization have thought, oh, maybe we should do a bit of change management at the last minute, and by then it's already too late. Already enough negative consensus may have been built in the background, which threatens to derail your whole roadmap. So I can probably think of a few scenarios of real impactful changes. One of them was when I was working for a payment provider. I was VP of process engineering and automation. There I built very rapidly. We had 40 bots live in production in the space of about 6 months. And although it was very successful, it was elements of Lean Six Sigma, RPA bots, and chat bots as well, to address some of the untapped opportunities. But when we went to go live, one of the challenges was the bots were performing very well from a technical standpoint, but from a business exception standpoint, they were still generating quite a lot of exceptions. So my task, as well as all the change management that had gone before, was to embed the command center strategy, but also give the business the power to be able to manage the changes going forward and reduce the amount of exceptions that were being created, working with the CFO as well, and having a strategy to tweak and change the business rules, ensure that more could be processed that could be, to get that better return on investment as well. And there I had a scenario where they were only able to begin with to process about 40% of the cases. That increased to 80% of business cases that the bot could process at the end of that whole journey. So quite substantial. Another scenario I had at a Big Four where I was consulting there was working with a stakeholder. Gregor was talking about risk area, managing a risk area, naturally very change averse in my experience at least. And I got the feedback, well, if I do automation, my job will be gone. Even if you tell me it won't, I know it will. That's what's going to happen. I just know it. And I spent a lot of time with this particular lead, understanding the process in depth, digging down into the detail, really getting into what they were doing day to day. And we found that they could save about 2 hours a day in their work. And through the change management that I'd learned over the years, asked some quite open questions, was always very transparent to build that trust. And actually, to my surprise, I said, what could you do with these 2 hours? What are you and the team going to do? Oh, actually, I can think of about 5 scenarios, I have 5 objectives that the team can't get to. And she just reeled them off just like that. And this change had been stuck for about 6 months. And that got the buy-in to then, oh yeah, I could be doing this, move forward with it. And then the final scenario is, I've been told, and this happens quite a bit as well, you talk about IA, you talk about PDDs, SDDs, Lean Six Sigma, citizen development, and I've got the feedback, Laura, what on earth are you talking about? This is like foreign language. And being a linguist, that's like music to my ears, but these are all English-speaking stakeholders. And what I've had to do there, and I've had this in the past more recently, is put together a terms of reference. Keep communicating, keep communicating, keep communicating. Don't stop until you're confident those leads can present it back to you. And don't just think about what everything means. Think about why. Why do you need a process definition document? Why do you need a good command center strategy? And through all of that, in that particular scenario, good communication, good command center strategy, good change approach, Lean Six Sigma elements, that all achieved 3 million in benefits in the space of 6 months after that was all set up.
Yeah, you're right. With the foreign languages, Lean Six Sigma black belt. I'm not doing karate. That's not thing, isn't it? And I think one of the problems, we've all been in the space long enough that I think one of the problems that probably came around because of the RPA vendors themselves was when they first advertised RPA, they were advertising it on FTE saving, employee numbers saved, and this sort of stuff. And then if you're an employee in the business and you take a little look at the website of any of the big guys and you see, oh, we've saved 30 members of staff over the past 6 months in this client and this sort of stuff, it's hardly engendering change. It's not encouraging these people to put it into their processes and doing all of this sort of stuff. You see they've moved now to saving a number of man hours or percentage of time saved and freed up and this sort of thing. I don't know how you guys felt about how they originally did it and how much that helped or hindered the change.
That messaging, I think the messaging has changed a lot in the last years. Also, companies, especially in Italy, are very sensible to reducing humans or cut costing based on reducing FTEs. So it's usually hours given back to the business now. So it's not like cutting down the hours and reducing it. No, I'm giving you back hours that were locked in activities and tasks that were time consuming, that were actually taking away from actually expanding your business. Now I'm giving back that into the business. There's a lot of talk about kind of working together with these agents and bots, and very little talk about actually replacing the humans. That could be a whole different 20 series, I think, of webinars where we can discuss if that's going to happen or if it's just going to be a complete just no human work and just everything being done by the robot. But yeah, that's kind of for everybody to decide by themselves and based on that experience. In my personal opinion, we are moving towards end-to-end automation, meaning we take an input something and then we automate the whole process until the output. Now also with the logic including, and that kind of leaves very little space for the human inside of that process. However, there might be space in a process that might have been created because we create this new automated process, such as creating end-to-end automations maybe.
No, I completely agree. And Cassidy, having worked in consultancies the majority of your life, I know that a lot of employees, when a consultancy comes in, their first thoughts are cuts. They're looking at finding people who they can get rid of and all of this sort of stuff. And oh no, they're automating, so they're definitely going to get rid of us. How do you combat that? How do you get people on your side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, just like Gregor stated, things have really shifted in the past few years. When I first was starting out in consulting, it was very much like the movie Office Space, if you've seen that, where you're sitting down, you interview everyone, and you're like, tell me what you do. And you're, analyzing who would be beneficial to keep on the team, who's going to be adding the most value. And we are so far past that at this moment. We are really focused on enhancing employees' satisfaction and also their workload, making sure that they're working on strategic and value-add activities rather than tedious, monotonous tasks. So in my world, I really believe that it's shifted quite a bit from a consulting experience. Obviously, I think there's a huge benefit to upskilling your workforce. And I'm sure we'll be getting into that more later. But I think that with this new digital age, everyone knows about automation. It's no secret anymore. And it's becoming less scary for a lot of people. And so I think they're excited about it. And it's just generating that excitement and funneling it towards the right initiatives.
No, I completely agree. And as you say, on Office Space, when all of it is TPS reports and all of this sort of stuff, that's all automated now, so they don't need to worry about it, do they?
Yeah.
But Gregor, you've successfully achieved digital transformation in large Fortune 500 companies and institutions. Do you think there's a particular difference in tactics when it comes to change management in large workforces in big companies compared to maybe smaller, less established, maybe even more agile ones?
There is a complete difference in approach. It's completely different. It's a different beast. So working in EY, KPMG, and also in Invoke in Canada, clients were mostly large organizations, Fortune 500s, or governments. Right now, I'm dealing mostly with startups and SMEs, and it's completely different. So first of all, the scale of the RPA program inside a large organization is completely different than compared to a smaller organization. Their kind of communication or communicating inside to their user, to the employees, to the different departments about the requirements needed to identify new processes, about identifying champions and change agents that are going to be inside of each department, that are going to be the ones responsible for identifying processes. Larger companies have a budget that makes you be capable of adding the full UiPath suite with all of the bells and whistles instead of just focusing on the community edition and trying to kind of work your ways around. So you factor that into your center of excellence that you're going to be building inside of your organization. So because of such a availability of budget and because of such structure, you usually tend to create or dedicate resources that are fully allocated to doing RPA, to identifying processes, to building. So you create a center of excellence most of the time. So usually when you are dealing with large organizations, it's more about a long-term sale or like a long-term strategy about how you're going to set up the resources, enable them, do the training, have them grow, identify new processes, and kind of like a loop. While for smaller companies, it's more I need kind of like a Band-Aid, more or less. I have this process. It's I'm going to have to hire a new person. Can I do something that's that's cheaper than hiring a new person? So the approach is more kind of not that strategic at this point. However, the barrier of entry for smaller organizations has gone down due to many different tools in RPA that are available. Therefore, this is not a tool only for the larger organizations. And now there is a whole plateau of small size, medium size, and even startups that are wanting to adopt RPA and instead of hiring humans.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's night and day sometimes when you're talking to people, and also I guess it's not necessarily just about that. It's about the appetite within the business and the different levels. Cassidy, you've worked, I guess, with plenty of large companies and small companies. Do you find the appetite is particularly different, whether it's a smaller company wanting to automate, or do you find that sometimes the big guys are doing it because they've been told they need to, because they can see their competitors? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that honestly, everything that Gregor said hit the nail on the head. I've worked with, large Fortune 500 organizations, and I've also worked with some startups, mom and pop shops, and their focus is completely different as far as what the vision is. A lot of these smaller organizations just want the quick wins, and so do the larger organizations, but they understand at a greater length that this requires a larger strategy at scale. So, that is something to consider when looking at this. But I do think that overall we see change management is frequently overlooked across the board for 4 different reasons. I think if I could, firstly, organizations may prioritize the technical aspects of implementing automation and overlooking the human element of change. And unfortunately, projects often involve significant investments in technology, and therefore anything else regarding change management is kind of tossed to the side and overlooked. And consequently, that does impact financially the organization in the long run, right? We see that frequently. Secondly, change management requires time, resources, and expertise. This also has an additional cost and effort on the client side. And that limited perspective fails to recognize change management and that it's essential for maximizing that return on investment on your automation. I think that's so frequently overlooked. I've seen that with clients where they just think that the automation is going to do that, which kind of brings it to my third point of change can be uncomfortable and challenging. I've seen multiple organizations shy away from complexities of change management and opt for a purely technical approach, hoping that the benefits of automation will naturally just cascade through their organization. We frequently see that that's not the case. And Laura, you're nodding your head in agreement here, and I love it. And lastly, fourthly, change management is a long-term endeavor. It's not just a Band-Aid fix. No matter the size of the organization, it's continuous monitoring, feedback, and adjustment throughout the implementation process and far beyond that.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you say, it's not something that you can do it and then be like, I've completed it, we're done now, we can move on to the next thing. It's something that constantly needs work and constantly requires fixes. Laura, I know you've worked in a number of different countries, and I know everyone here has worked on at least a number of large companies that have offices in different places. Culture has a huge impact on change management. How do you manage to get everyone in the same line? How do you manage to make sure that you're all singing off the same hymn sheet when you've got an office in the UK, an office in France, an office in Bangladesh, and all of these sorts of guys that have completely different ideas of what good looks like and this sort of thing?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there is, as Cassidy was saying, there is that attitude that is a bit soft and woolly. Change management, why should we do it? But change management will help you understand those cultural differences you're dealing with. I mean, I think we're going to go on to talk about some of the methodologies, but no matter what culture you are, what language you speak, you need to give people the impetus for change. And one of the models I've used, I've written an article about it recently, is the ADKAR model. It's very simple to remember, and it helps with that whole communication of change, no matter what culture you're in. And it stands for building an awareness of change, a desire for change, a knowledge for change, the ability to change, having the right training plans, the right structure in place so that can be embedded, people can take it forward, and then the reinforcement of that change. And in my experience, I've been able to use that in small and large organizations as well, looking at is there an awareness where maybe there's high attrition, low morale, maybe missed SLAs are happening. That's you're starting to build an awareness of the need for change. There is the desire there? Are people looking at better ways of working? And in the other example I mentioned, do people understand when the change happens how their roles may be impacted? And then you're looking at giving them the ability. How are you going to train people to use new tools? Are you using just UiPath? Which tool does it? Well, you'll have made these decisions already, but how do you upskill? Who do you use to do this? How do you give them that ability? And then that reinforcement, just keep reinforcing the change, keep the training plans in place, keep iterating on the technology you're using, potentially bringing new tools in as well. That all is part of managing a change across cultures and across boundaries as well.
No, perfect. Thanks so much for that. That's definitely a good one to remember. As you say, it's just trying to engender it and encourage it through every person, isn't it? It can't just be top down. It can't just be people telling you need to change, because that's never gonna happen. Sorry, I did. Sorry, on.
It's looking at things from there. What's in it for you will be very different to what's in it for them. It's having that real empathetic lens of why do they need to change?
Yeah, exactly. And these aren't the robots that we're dealing with. These are the people, so they're going to need to be encouraged to do it and enthusiastic about it. Sorry, I didn't realise there are a couple of questions. So Tony, I think this was in reference to your talk about your time with the payment provider when you mentioned the 6-month savings. How long did it take to set up the strategy, the scenario prior to that 6-month delivery stage?
Months.
Sorry?
3 months.
Oh wow. So it wasn't too long.
No. It was intensive, but really good fun.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And Harrison has asked, how do you propose creating and putting forward a clear after vision and a real world examples before presenting RPA to your employees? I guess anyone here, when you've been presenting RPA and what it can do through a consultancy or through an end user, how are you putting people at ease, and how are you giving them that after vision? What are you saying?
It's
Gregor, yeah.
I would say that it's about enabling them or upskilling your team, your colleagues. So creating so-called citizen developers. So the IT department is overstaffed or overcrowded with requests from your team to create this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool. Well, one solution is that we enable our team that is not developer team, but is just a business team, to create solutions that previously they would have required a coder or a developer to do. Now this with Microsoft Power Automate, UiPath, all of the tools that have been created to enable citizen developers to build solutions that previously required experts. So this will be putting the kind of the power into the hands of the employees, meaning that the employees are not creating robots that are going to secretly take their job away. The employees are creating things and processes and tasks and web pages and stuff that is making their job simpler, so that they can do more with the same time they have. So that is kind of, I think, one of the ways on pushing RPA onto the workforce, not as something that is going to cut FTEs and cut hours and reduce the manual processes. And every time in every large organization that I go, there's always those people that are afraid that their job is going to get taken. But you know what? It is. In many of those examples, those jobs did actually get taken, and the person was kind of, in many cases, was very upset. But whatever, that's a different story. So by promoting, I think, upskilling of your resources, I think it's a great way of promoting RPA within organizations.
Yeah,
I could tag on to what Gregor just said. I completely agree with what he said, but I do think that a key to this is communication and that message from the top down, right? Leadership needs to be effectively motivating and supporting their employees and the automation process. You need that support from the top down, or the automation will fail. So, change leaders should be using change assessments and data to inform comprehensive strategies to provide dynamic and interactive experiences designed to not only build the new skills, but also adopt and sustain new ways of digitized, working in a digitized environment. So, obviously this is through an robust internal communication plan, but this approach will reach employees at all levels and inspire them to embrace intelligent automation, not to fear it. And I think that will help with the overall vision.
Yeah,
I think that was almost the next question.
No, I agree. I was just going to say, talking of citizen developers, while it's all well and good, I think there needs to be some robust guidelines, managements, and this sort of thing. I was speaking to a large business this week, and they have one of the big RPA vendors, but they also started bringing in Power Automate and empowering all of their employees to use Power Automate. And it's got to a point where they've got 1,000 processes and 1,000 flows in Power Automate across all of their employees, and some of these are business critical. And what they didn't realize is that if that person leaves and doesn't transfer the process over, in 30 days that process dies. And they were like, oh, brilliant, we can just hand it to them, we can give them all of the power, we can put the power in their hands for this automation. And now they're like, what do we do? How do we fix this? Because now they've suddenly got all of these power automates, no power automate COE, because they've got a COE in a different product, and now they're at this point. So yeah, if you don't have those guidelines and that idea of what potentially could happen if, then you get that in place too.
Yeah, I think it's about transparency here as well, and being absolutely, as Cassidy was saying about communication from the top, it's also transparency, making people aware of what's happening in order to build the trust. Sorry, my screen has just gone to sleep. I lost you all. Yeah, it's about that element of transparency. When you're building a vision, it's also understanding how other people look at the world as well. So, you know, some people have, there's different learning styles, aren't there? Some people have a visual learning style, so they like to, I don't know, see a bot working on a screen, seeing is believing. There's other people that have an auditory learning. I've worked with a person that very clearly had an auditory learning style, because all they did was talk at me, and that wasn't going to encourage me to adopt any kind of change, because that wasn't my particular style. There's others that like to touch it, feel it, to learn what the change is. And here you have scenarios like citizen development, where you have, you know, prototyping forums. So when you're building that vision, take on board your stakeholders that you're dealing with and their learning styles, understand their objectives, understand their challenges in their process to build the right vision for them.
Completely. No, I agree. And that leads me quite nicely to Cassidy. Obviously, you've mentioned about being a founder of Women in Automation, and we've all spoken about diversity and inclusion now. What ways do you think D&I can play a pivotal role in effective change management during RPA implementation?
Yeah, great question. You know, I obviously believe that diversity and inclusivity absolutely play a pivotal role in effective change management during the automation implementation and beyond. Really ensuring a diverse representation in the automation program teams, organizations can bring different perspectives, experiences, and ideas to the table. This diversity can lead to a more robust problem solving, better decision making overall, and increased acceptance of change at the end of the day. You know, I do believe that with inclusivity involving actively engaging employees at all levels, showing that you value their contributions and providing equal opportunities for growth and development by upskilling, it's going to create a healthier culture and environment, like we were talking about with Laura earlier. You know, and I think that the beauty of change management in these organizations is frequently, you know, obviously we know that specifically in the tech world, there's only, you know, I think something like 26% women in this space, which is, you know, upsetting to say the least as someone who's the founder of Women in Automation. But luckily, you know, automation is impacting every industry, every organization, every business unit for the most part, right? So when you're going through change management, where you're working with these businesses frequently that are, you know, much more diverse than the tech space itself, and it gives an equal opportunity for everyone through upskilling and understanding automation to only better their career path. So I think there's, you know, a lot of benefits to change management here, and including that diversity and inclusivity role.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And it is, as Laura touched on before, everyone's got a different way of learning, and everyone's got a different way of understanding. And if you're one size fits all, then you're only going to get one size in the business, and you're only going to get one size that works for it, and that's not how things go forward, not how things work properly. But yeah, no, thanks. So Gregor, what would you say is the best way to monitor the effectiveness? How do you know if your change management efforts have worked, or if it's just luck? How do you know?
You know, from my experience, you would know afterwards. Meaning, if the success cases don't stop with that process that you have been building. So if the organization goes on and continues building processes, and the center of excellence keeps growing, and more processes are automated, then it's being a success. Otherwise, you are going from department to department with the same use case, with the same success case. Talking about the success that you had 6 months ago, but then what happened with the robot? Something happened with the developer, or whatever, million excuses. So you know if it's going successful, if it's growing, and if it's if more processes are being automated.
Yeah, I don't know what you think, Laura. I think sometimes you're almost working on a knife edge of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. and also trying to make sure that it's the best level that it can be, and trying to not fall on either side of it?
Yes, I mean that you need to have space for people to express their concerns, their fears, but you also need to have that experimentation space as well. You know, I once worked with a stakeholder who said failure is not an option, and you know that's a really closed mindset to have, because you are going to make mistakes, you are going to have a lessons learned log. I think the biggest mistake is not to learn from that lessons learned log and just keep repeating them on the next bot implementation. You know, they've been my kind of learnings. I think when I'm monitoring change, I've designed little quick surveys to assess where people are on the change life cycle. You can do them in one-on-one interviews. I've got a nice matrix with 20 odd parameters that looks at communication, looks at champions, looks at leadership support, looks at people's understanding of the impact on their roles in the scenario before. It was, yeah, what are people going to be doing instead of what they're doing now, and then monitor that. But you've also got other tools now in the market. You've got UI task capture. People can put in their ideas. You've got other I've recently been working with a company called Latent Bridge, where you can put in your KPIs, 3 to 5 KPIs. You can have a repository for people to send their ideas in. And before, I used to spend time setting up a dedicated mailbox for people to, you know, send their ideas. And now you've got quite cost-effective tools that manage that whole process. And as Gregor was saying, the more ideas you have coming in, that's a really good sign that, you know, your change management is working.
Yeah, no, thanks. So I appreciate that. And how have you found it, Cassidy, from the consultancy side of it? I guess it's not you're not necessarily seeing the whole life cycle of it through to the end. It's the implementation. It's making sure people get a grip of it at the start and then sort of push forward. So at what point are you like, that was successful for us, we did all we could do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is different from a consultancy side, right? I don't get to see the final end product, unfortunately, but we, you know, there are things that we can do to monitor and understand, you know, what the adoption rate is, you know, by interviewing employees, making sure that they're satisfied. I've also noticed that by involving the workers at an early stage, you're much more likely to be successful, especially impacting the entire culture. One of this is, you know, to ensure that you're including peer advocates. It's not just coming from the top down, but also from peer advocates or influencers in your own organization, if you will, who are really excited about the automation benefits and are going to help spread the word with their coworkers. I think that another word for it is change agents, but we notice a much larger acceptance of technology at a higher amount of positive reaction when peers were involved, instead of just leadership being the only ones advocating for the change.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. Tony just dropped another message in. Laura, the tool to plug in KPIs, did you say that was Latent Bridge?
Yes, that's one of them. Yes, I'm not on commission. It's
Yeah, Latent Bridge. I'll drop a note over, Tony, just to make sure you got that if it does come through. But yeah, and Gregor, what have you found have been the biggest challenges or resistance to change that organizations have faced? Do you think it's employees being scared they're losing their jobs? Do you think it's people not necessarily understanding it? What do you think are the biggest challenges?
It's really hard to kind of pick one challenge that is the same across organizations. It really depends on geography, depends on the size of the organization, the vision of the organization, the stage at which they are with their technological roadmap of implementing RPA or other technologies. But most of the time, the main issue, kind of when you start working on RPA projects, where you pass the strategy and you pass the stakeholders, who are actually on the ground getting the requirements and working to actually create the process that, or identify the requirements for the process, is the people. Meaning that there's always a fear that activities and tasks are going to be taken away from them, and they're going to be less responsible and less useful to the organization. That's mostly because there's been a poor change management plan. There has been poor communication with them, telling them that of activities that they will have to do afterwards. You know, you give up these activities so that you can do these other activities. But what are going to be these other activities value-adding activities that I'm going to be doing after this robot kind of takes my place? Well, you'll figure them out someday. That's kind of 90% of the situation. That's how it kind of goes. You are sitting with this person and they are supposed to tell you 90% of the things that they are doing, you're kind of going to do them now with the software. And then what do you think? My boss is not going to figure out that I'm kind of just rolling my thumbs right now and I have to figure out some value-adding tasks. So what happens is that they start kind of making it really hard to get the business requirements. They start over structuring, over engineering, making it really complex, and that kind of makes you lose control of the process of the project and so forth. So this kind of lack of awareness and understanding, I think, is one of the biggest issues, kind of limiting the adoption of certain kinds of RPA projects. So those RPA projects are kind of big, that you need a specific software that's going to take up to 90%, 80% of the employee's time. So yeah, fear of job loss mostly.
Would you agree, Laura? Do you think that's the biggest barrier, and what communication strategies, I guess, would you suggest to overcome that?
Yeah, I mean that's always going to play into it, no matter how you frame the hype around it. I've got a few notes on some of the challenges. So one of them I've had in the past and recently, we've been there, done it, it didn't work. And when you've got that scenario, you need to really help them take a step back, think about why didn't it work last time? What can we do differently this time to make it work? It's as simple as that. Another piece of feedback that I've had over the years, we know what you're telling us already. And if you have that, there's a lot more intelligent automation tools in the market now. They may have a gut feel of what's going well, not what's going not so well. Why is that challenge still there for them? So you've got process mining tools, task mining tools that will give them that data-driven business case to move forward with the change. Help them do that. Write the business case for them to get momentum on the change. And also practice good stakeholder management. So you may have somebody that's really against the change to begin with. Can you use these methods, use a change management model, ADKAR, potentially to turn their thinking around, have that empathetic lens? What's really driving them? There's a good visual I've got in front of me, written by Growth Cloud, and there was a cartoonist called Tom Fishburne, and it shows an organizational chart, and it shows the chief idea killer at the top, and into the chief idea killer you've got the VP of no, the VP of the status quo, and the VP of staying the course. And you need to be thinking, when you're doing your change management, who am I dealing with here? What action plan, what strategy can I form to move the change forward in spite of them? ADKAR I use, that there's other methods. You've got a grief life cycle that people often go through as well, where they deny what's happening, then they get really angry, then they start to bargain, and then they go right down into the depths of potentially depression, and then they come out with acceptance at the other side. I've been able to assess individuals using that framework, but to formulate a really good action plan, the simplest I've used across different organizations is ADKAR. The key point here is communication. Use that to communicate.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think also when you say there's the graphic with a chief idea killer, we can probably all imagine someone. We've probably got someone in our head who we've worked with before, or who we know who fits that mold perfectly. So it's just ubiquitous, don't you? And Cassidy, obviously you've got to go into end users, whip up excitement about an RPA project, and Sarah here has asked, how do you go about getting that excitement there? Because I think I know all of us probably have been to events where someone's talking about a new release in RPA or anything like that, and it could be really interesting, it could be really good stuff, but it sends you to sleep because they're not presenting it the right way, and this sort of stuff. So how do you go about making sure people are enthused, excited, and looking forward to getting involved?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair and great question, to be honest with you, because I think that excitement is such a strong emotion. And, if we can properly capture that, it really sends, the direction of the program in the right, or sends the program in the right direction at the end of the day. I truly believe a lot of that comes from top-down leadership, the right message, the right vision coming directly from them. But also getting employees excited about the upskilling. I think I spoke on this earlier of everyone knows what automation is, and it's becoming less scary now. And so, by training, by very targeted training, the right communication, I think Laura was speaking earlier, I think the idea of radical transparency is perfect for an organization that really is trying to drive transformation. And, providing that upskilling, fostering a culture of lifelong learning, and providing support resources, demonstrating success stories and case studies within the organization is really going to be beneficial. So really, at the end of the day, by fostering a culture of transparency, empathy, continuous learning, and organizations can help alleviate the fears and build more of a positive and engaged workforce during the automation journey.
Perfect. No, thank you so much. And we're coming near all of the questions that I've written down, which I think I've just asked in a completely different way. But if there are any other questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and I'll ask anyone anything about RPA and change management at least. But so let's say it goes, you've done change management, but then the RPA project doesn't go as planned. It's nothing necessarily to do with the change management. It's maybe they chose the wrong thing or something like that. How do you encourage people to do it again? How do you reignite them? How do you get them encouraged to be like, well, it didn't work, but we're going to give it another crack? Gregor.
Well, it's in the mindset like we were talking about previously. So it's saying like failure is not an option. That's not the right mindset to have. The organization should have a mindset that encourages failure and promotes change and supports people trying different things, because failure is not kind of failure. You're just trying something that didn't work. And if you see it as trying something that didn't work, but then you're going to try again and you learn your lessons and you're going to try something new, and you encourage this kind of behavior, then RPA or whatever that matter would be in the organization is not really an issue. However, if it's a highly structured organization with lots of different assistant, senior, executive managers of all kinds of different levels and for all kinds of different departments, it kind of becomes hard to promote a culture of culture where failure is, because you have to point the finger to somebody to blame it for the resources that have been spent and the project that didn't work. Why? Because you can't really listen to all of the to everybody and understand what's the issue. So it really, I think it's really in the organization, in the structure of the organization, in the department where you're working on. It becomes easier. I think the smaller the organization, the smaller the team is where you're working. So it's nothing to do with RPA, in my opinion. It's more the culture of the organization, how it's set up.
No, I understand that. And another question, Laura, for you. When we mentioned top down, when stuff like this does happen, if you're trying to work with those stakeholders at the senior level and keep them engaged and keep that buy-in, how do you go about that when necessarily it's not millions of pounds worth of saving in 6 months?
So I think you need to showcase your small wins and keep reiterating, keep showing the progress. The worst, even if you've had a lot of success, even if you're going into a new area, in my experience at least, the worst thing you can do is have an all singing, all dancing business case. I was in an investment bank where it was the mantra, go big or go home. And actually you needed to really trim that back, trim the scope of what was being done back, and celebrate those small successes. Getting the right metrics set up with the leadership up front is absolutely crucial. Get quite a slick methodology of showing how change will be managed, and also how processes and the tools and technology and the people changes will come about. Use the right reporting, use the right heat mapping to show those changes moving forward. I would say another point here when you're dealing with execs is make space for conflict. Don't be scared of it. You know, you don't want a scenario where everybody's nodding, saying, "Oh yes, change is good. We want this to happen," and 6 months later, still nothing has happened. You're better having those honest. I think you called it radical transparency, Cassidy, which sounds really great. It's having those transparent conversations, getting people's fears out in the open, not to manipulate, but to understand how to manage what they're looking for from the initiative, and moving it forward in that way, and making sure that you have the right training plans in place. I think we've already touched on that. Another thing to sustain that momentum is have a monthly reward ceremony. So easy to forget that you must celebrate your successes. I've had execs coming into that, have monthly reward ceremonies, have the exec coming in and presenting an award. It's a really simple thing to do and set up, and it gives such huge motivation, especially on very large programs that are very intensive, gives such huge motivation and reward to people.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And yeah, you're right. There's just so many different aspects that people don't overlook. I think a lot of the time, as you say, change management often is overlooked, and every part of it is because you're just assuming it's going to fall into place, or that everyone's on the same page as you already. And that's I think where a lot of it fails. Jim, thanks for the message. Yeah, I think this is probably my fault as well. I'm referring to everything as RPA, whereas realistically, we use a lot of intelligent automation to tackle issues within and use a lot of different parts. Cassidy, I know that Tquila are working on stuff. How do you find that as well? Because I guess RPA is one thing to explain, but then when you're putting process mining in it, conversational AI, all of these sorts of things, then you're just like, well, it's literally everything I do.
That's fair. And, you know, we handle it differently depending on the level of employees and what they're interacting with. I do believe in targeted training because we don't want to overwhelm employees all at once, especially with the capabilities of intelligent automation nowadays. It can seem very daunting and overwhelming, especially with generative AI and all its capabilities now. I think people are slowly getting to grasps of, you know, the possibilities of intelligent automation, but there's still a lot of fear out there, and rightfully so, to be honest. But RPA is an easy one, and it's usually where we get organizations to dip their toes in at first, right? Most Fortune 500 companies have started that, you know, around a decade ago. And so they're leaning more into the strategic automation. But, you know, like we talked about earlier in the conversation, with Gregor, that depending on the small organizations, they are dipping more into that RPA and maybe discussing some process mining or task mining and just starting to get the hint of it. So it depends on what the organization is, what they need, and, you know, tackling it in a very specific way, depending on, you know, their vision. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. And another one in from Giovanni here. Thanks for this. An approach that he found out was helpful was, I know we've mentioned a lot about the top down, but working from bottom up. So giving the ability to the employees to propose new ideas about how to change what they do, not only to automate what they do. It's been really phenomenal for him, for the trust, and more so for innovation. And I guess that's where you're mentioning, if people are coming to you and they're saying, oh, well, I know we're doing RPA, but I've seen this about task mining, I've seen this about conversational AI. If they're coming to you, that's when you know you're doing well. That's when you know that you're on the right lines with it. And they've said they do accept there's a lot more change management required on that side. There are only a few clients actually did it, let alone successfully. What are your guys' experience with that more, I guess, bottom up side of things? Laura.
Yeah, I mean, you need whatever strategy and vision you're following. You need the eyes, for want of a better phrase, the people at the coalface to tell you whether what you're proposing is going to work. You know, you've got just as much to learn from them as they have from you. And yeah, I've led proposals on citizen development. I've managed consultants in the past that have used citizen development tools in banks to adhere to regulatory changes, to stop the fat fingering that was going on, and then these people who are doing the nitty-gritty work have then the opportunity to present what they've done to other people, and get rewards on that basis as well. And that's, as I was saying before, that's really motivational, letting them take the tools away, learn them, getting confident in them, getting them proficient in them, and then showing what they're able to do with them, and showing that in that particular scenario there was a 50% reduction in the amount of time it took to put a reconciliation report together. So it's working with them, but have them feeding into that overall strategy, and maybe they'll highlight something that, oh, we didn't quite get that right in that area, how can we tweak that to get potentially even more benefits?
Yeah, no, exactly. And Gregor, as you mentioned, giving them their own power on that side of things really encourages them to do it themselves, and makes them more comfortable with it, I guess, makes them not as scared of the change and what it could mean for them. But I think that's all the time that we've got. Yeah, flew by. But I wanted to thank all of you so much for your time. As you say, I think the thing to be left with really is that change management is something that's very much at the bottom of people's agenda. It's what people fly in at the end when they're trying to blame something that didn't go right, but by then it's too late, and then every part of it's overlooked in different ways. So I think it's just, as you say, making sure that when you start any project, it's the top of your list. How do we make sure we can get everyone involved, everyone enthused about it, and get everyone moving in the right direction? But yeah, thanks Laura, thanks Cassidy, thanks Gregor. It's so great to speak to all of you. If anyone's got any questions, I'm sure everyone will be happy to reach out, happy to chat. This recording will be sent out to everyone as well. But thanks so much for the time. Look forward to catching up with everyone soon. Thanks so much. Bye.